Hi, I'm Adrian Lee, and you're listening to the Decibel from the Globe and Mail. Today is Remembrance Day. It's the first one since the fall of Kabul in Afghanistan. And even before the US and other coalition forces withdrew from the country in August, soldiers and veterans have been working overtime to get Afghan interpreters and support staff to safety.
Anyone who doesn't think that those people are vets really doesn't understand what it means to be a soldier in arms, as far as I'm concerned.
That's retired Corporal Robin Rickards. He joins us on the show today to talk about how his Afghan interpreter friend managed to escape to his hometown of Thunder Bay. So let's cut through the noise. You're listening to the Decibel. Hi, Robin. Thanks for talking with me today.
It's a pleasure, Adrian. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about the issue.
So can you tell me a bit about your service in the Canadian Armed Forces and what you did while you were in Afghanistan?
Sure. I served 11 years with the Canadian Forces as a reservist and did 4 tours of duty overseas, with 1 to Bosnia-Herzegovina and 3 to Afghanistan, and 1 in the summer of 2006, 1 in the summer of 2008, and 1 over the winter months of 2009-2010.
So Canada was in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2014, and you've since moved on to a new career, but you've kept in touch with Afghans you met there, right?
Yeah, I've tried to keep in touch, and they had an interest in my life. I had an interest in theirs, and so those friendships have been maintained through the years.
Folks might understand the role of interpreters for the military there, but can you tell us a bit about the roles that Afghans might play for the military?
You know, take, for instance, the kitchen staff. In earlier conflicts, those staff members would have consisted of Canadian Forces personnel preparing the meals for the soldiers engaged in the fighting. But in Afghanistan, what we saw was that we had a significant delegation of that responsibility to local nationals. So we would have a kitchen officer, usually a sergeant or a warrant officer, who would be in charge of a whole host of Afghans who would prepare our meals and who we could rely on to feed us and, quite frankly, not betray us, because, you know, the opportunity was there. Had they wanted to, and they would have been rewarded handsomely. But, you know, we never saw an instance of Canadian soldiers being poisoned by the Afghans that fed them, because there was this deal that they were working with us to help build a better future for Afghanistan.
And tell me a bit more about this potential for betrayal. I mean, what inspired Afghans to assist our military there and be on side with our mission?
The conversations that emerged from the people that I spoke with in the bazaars, in the fields, so on and so forth, when those opportunities arose, was an idea that there might finally be a chance for some positive change in the direction their country was headed and in the direction their own lives were headed. And they were excited about that, and they were interested in finding ways to help that come to fruition faster. And so a lot of Afghans worked with us because they had this honest belief that the Canadians are telling us they're going to build a better future with us, and they were eager to get to work.
What's remarkable, though, about that belief and that hope is that it comes at the same time as a great deal of risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, these folks that worked with us were basically, in the Taliban's eyes, Muslims who had abandoned Islam, and the penalty for that is simply death. You know, we use the word traitors, but I think the more appropriate term in the context is apostates. And so whenever the opportunity arose, the Taliban would engage in targeted killings. And we saw that, back in 2011 with a fellow that we had nicknamed Popeye. His real name was Fida Mohammed. And he didn't speak English at all, and we'd always greet him with a Sangaye or talk to him a little bit in the Pashto that we had. his tasks were very mundane. He would fuel the generators in the camp. He would cut the lawns and tend the flower beds, and that was sort of his work. Well, he went to visit his family went out one day to visit his family in the summer of 2011, and the Taliban pulled him off his motorcycle and executed him on the street in Kandahar city because he had the temerity to tend the flower beds at the PRT and refuel our generators. But to the Taliban, he was an apostate.
Wow. And so even a decade later, the Taliban still know who worked with us?
Well, secrets want to be told. It's very difficult to keep what you did away from people. People know, family know, friends know.
When you were in Afghanistan, you met someone named Abdul Jamy Kohistany, or as you call him, Jami. How did you meet him?
He was one of the interpreters with the battle group. When my company would go out and patrol, our company commander always wanted Jami to come with us. So he'd make a special request to the company that we hired the contract or the interpreters from, and so Jami always came with us when we were patrolling.
What drew you to Jami in particular?
I don't know. How did you decide who your childhood friends were going to be? Right? I mean, some people, the conversations you strike up, there's just a natural interest, and other conversations are polite, but that's the extent of it. Jami and I just had more interesting conversations, and it was mutual interest. I was curious about Afghanistan, and he was very curious about Canada. Our outlooks on the world were sort of similar, and yeah.
What did Jami do after the mission ended then?
After we drew down, he went on to work with the Americans for a little bit, and then subsequently, he went on to work with a series of NGOs in the law reform section.
And you kept in touch then, too?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'd talk, once or twice a month pretty consistently for the past decade.
So let's fast forward then to August of this year. What were the messages from Jami like at that time?
Well, look, I mean, at one point in time, Jami and I had talked about this for many years. I've been trying for 10 years to get him out of Afghanistan because even back then I recognized the risk. And in 2010, it became abundantly clear that public support in Afghanistan was rapidly evaporating. People liked the fact that the Taliban wasn't there, but they didn't like what had replaced the Taliban. And so by the summer of last year, when Jami was talking with me, it became we were talking one time, and I think the quote from him sums it up best. He said, "At some point, buddy, there's not going to be anything that you can do. We're trying everything." And to this day, we're still trying everything because there's a lot of people other than Jami who are still trapped, right? So we are getting to the point where there's going to be nothing that we can do. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do on the ground in Afghanistan to ensure their safety. So it becomes incumbent on Canada to provide a safe place for these folks to restart their lives, since we failed to live up to the promises that we made.
Well, something that really struck me about the situation as it came out in August was just how distant and difficult, and if not hopeless, it must have felt to do anything about it. What were you able to do for Jami when the news was emerging about the fall of Kabul?
Well, the answer is not much. The only thing that I did that helped Jami out was that days before the end of August, somewhere around the 27th or 28th, I told his brother, who was in the States, who had also worked for us and had subsequently gone on to work with the Americans. I told his brother Sammy, I said, "You better call every American you know in the forces And you better find somebody who knows someone in that airport if you want to get your family to safety. And Sammy got on the horn, managed to get in touch with a U.S. colonel who knew one of the Marines in the airport. And that Marine had his translator call Jami and arranged for them to be picked up and brought into the airport.
Do you know what exactly happened when Jami was picked up?
There was a bit of a miscommunication. So the Marine in the airport, rather than talking to Jami directly, had his interpreter talk with him. The interpreter asked him how many people there were. Jami told him that they had 15 adults and 13 kids. And when the vehicle showed up to pick them up, the bus showed up to pick them up, there were only 15 seats left. And so the family was left with the horrible decision of sorting who was going to get out to Canada, or who was going to get out to the airport, not even necessarily out to Canada, but to the airport, and who is going to be left behind.
Wow. So where is Jami and his family now?
Jami and half of his family are here in Thunder Bay, and we're working through the process of getting them settled into the community. You know, helping them get their health cards, helping them get settled into to a new home, get the kids started in school, and so on and so forth. And you know, working on helping folks find work and get them into for the family members that don't speak English as well, get them into their language classes.
What has it been like seeing Jami and his family here, you know, in your hometown?
You know, it's been a goal that I've had for a long time. So it's I'm glad and I'm grateful that he's here. There's also an anticlimax about it because we still have to consider how we're going to deal with the other half of his family that are left behind. I know that if the situations were reversed, Jami'd be doing the same thing for me. But I also know what it would be like for my kids and myself to abandon everything we've known to go somewhere completely foreign to us. And so, I've often said it to many people, including Afghans that I've met, when they'd ask why I came to Afghanistan. And I said, because your kids deserve to have the same opportunities that my kids have. The fact that my kids are born in Canada and your kids are born in Afghanistan shouldn't mean that there are such pronounced differences in their life that they may not even survive to adulthood because of where they live.
What do you think Canada owes Jami and people like him?
Look, I come from a labor background after my time in the forces, and I think the government, as an employer, has an obligation to make these people whole, right? And that means that they should be put in the position they would be in were it not for Canada just throwing in the towel and giving up. And so the only place that we can do that is here in Canada, because we can't tell our allies, here, take these guys for us. Yeah, we know they didn't work for you, but, we can't leave them behind to be slaughtered.
There might be folks who don't necessarily see Afghan-born nationals, whether or not they supported the CAF in this mission, as veterans. I mean, are they veterans?
We're the Merchant Marine veterans. We had a long, painful battle in this country over many years about whether or not merchant mariners should be treated as veterans. And in the end, as a country, we recognized that they face the same risks that the sailors in the Royal Canadian Navy faced during the Second World War. Their boats were torpedoed. The the Germans didn't make a distinction between their boats, and in many cases they deliberately targeted their boats to prevent the supplies from reaching Europe. Well, these folks are no different. The mission in Afghanistan would have been completely impossible were it not for the contributions these people made. The safety of Canadian troops, I want to be clear, at FOB Wilson and FOB Frontenac, each of those bases had 150 Afghans who were responsible for providing security so that our soldiers could sleep knowing that their backs were protected. And yet these folks have been abandoned in Afghanistan. Anyone who doesn't think that those people are vets really doesn't understand what it means to be a soldier in arms, as far as I'm concerned.
So what can Canadians do to avoid that situation where we just put our hands up and say there's nothing we can do about it?
Take some time, and I know it's something that Canadians never do, but I sure hope you think strongly about giving your member of parliament a call and telling them to act. That's what's required, because I'll tell you, if 100,000 Canadians across the country, scattered across the country, were to call their MPs, there would be a stampede to deal with this. Take some time out of your day. What does it take to pull up your member of parliament's phone number and call his office or her office and say, you need to do something about this?
How will you be spending Remembrance Day this year?
I'll be at the services, and then afterwards I'll probably be answering emails like I've been doing all summer and since the spring, in fact, just dealing with a never-ending stream of desperate messages from people in Afghanistan who think that somehow I can get them to safety. And then I'll write emails where I have to disabuse them of that notion and tell them that the only power I have is in shaming my government to act. And that as much as I want to be able to help them escape the situation they're in, I don't have the ability to do that. Only these people who work in the Canadian bureaucracy, whose names they'll never know, whose phone numbers they'll never have access to, will be the ones deciding their fate.
Well, Robin, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem, Adrian. I appreciate you having me.
That's it for today. I'm Adrian Lee. Our producers are Madeline White and Cheryl Sutherland. David Crosby edits the show. Kasia Mihailovich is our senior producer. Angela Pacenza is our executive editor. Thanks to retired Corporal Robin Rickards. If you want to reach the team, email us at thedecibel@globeandmail.com. If you want to reach me, I'm grudgingly on Twitter at Adrian K. Lee. And if you haven't already, hit that follow button wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.